Hi everybody, welcome back to the painting channel. Today it's watercolor, although it is something a little different, so let me show you how and why. Hi everyone and welcome back. As I said at the start, it is a watercolor, although it's something a little bit different. What I wanted to talk to you about in this video is using our scrap paper to practice on. Now, sometimes when we do a painting, it doesn't go the way we want it to, and because of that, we either tear it up, consign it to the bin, but often on the other side is a perfectly good piece of paper that we can use to practice on. You might want to even test your colors when you are doing another painting. So it's well worth keeping these back and using them as practice pieces. And when you practice, often you look at an area that I really need to learn more about doing this or learning about doing that, and so you can use these bits of paper to practice on. And the reason that I'm talking to you today about that is the other day I just had a little idea of painting some skies. I had a thought of doing a tutorial again on creating skies, which I probably will do in the very near future, but I wanted to just do a little practice piece just to play around with the idea, see where I'd take it. And I used the same piece of paper twice, and I did a sky and then turned it over and did another sky, and I didn't think any more about it. But later on in the day when it was dry, it was sitting there on the desk, and I felt, I could actually try and make something of that. So that's exactly what I did. I turned a practice piece of paper, I hope, into a very viable little painting, and I wanted to demonstrate that to you today. So the whole idea behind this is that even if you are using a piece of paper that you are going to practice on, consider your practice piece, and if you get it right, you can actually use that and turn it into something even better than just a practice piece. So without further ado, I'm going to get on with that. But before I do, as I always say, thank you so much to all my subscribers for supporting the channel. And if you are watching this, you're not a subscriber, consider subscribing. But above all, if you like the content, if you get to the very end of this video and you've enjoyed it, then click the like button and add a comment. And they're always welcome. You'll always be answered by me. Now, on top of that, if you want a lot more, there is a Patreon. The Patreon, all the details are under this video and every other video on my channel. Nip across there, see if there's something that you like, and join if you wish to. The tiers are very inexpensive, and the amount of content that you're getting are in the tens and tens of films on there now that you can really get to grips with and enjoy, both in oil and in watercolor. And also there is a very viable or very active Patreon community page of mine purely for my patrons on Facebook. You get to become a member of that too. And if you want even more, then hey, I just nip on over to my website. There are a couple of things going on there right now. There are a new series. The one is only one there at the moment, but there is a new series being developed of downloadable content, downloadable films that are exclusive to my website. On top of that, there are listings for Zoom demonstrations from me, paint along Zoom demonstrations over the coming months that you can buy a ticket for just £12, and look forward to seeing you on the day. So take a look at those, check them out and see what you like. In the meantime, let's look about practice makes perfect. Okay, as I was saying at the start, this is the piece that I was playing around with, and I did a sky and I let that dry, and then I came back and I thought, well, there's the bottom, I might as well do another sky. And when I did that, I looked at it later on in the day and I felt, I could actually do something with this. It was not a piece of paper that was just to be put in the bin at the end of the day. As any practice piece often is worth keeping anyway as a reference to somewhere down the line. You look back, you think, I did that back then and that really worked. So it's worth keeping these anyway if you have the room and the resources to store them. But in certain cases like this one, it's worth turning them into something a little bit more. So without further ado, These are cheaper papers that I use. You all know that I like to use a 300-pound Saunders Waterford or Arche paper, rough or hot press. They're my favourite surfaces. But when I'm coming to doing something like this, or I'm demonstrating for students at the gallery, I often use papers such as this. This is a Langton, this is a Daler Rowney. It's a loose leaf spiral bound paper, but it's really quite good because it's 200 pounds in weight. So it's not to be sniffed at. It's not 140 pounds or 325 GSM. This is somewhere about 450 GSM, something of that nature, 425, and it's 200 pounds. That's the key number, pounds, not GSM. And this is a rough surface, and it's really quite nice. I think it's rough. It's actually no, it's a knot. It's an average, not a rough one. But you get the idea. And the painting that I just showed you is actually using this paper to do that with. Another great surface that I use a lot, and I'm getting no money for any of this. I'm not advertising this. I'm just giving you some ideas as to what I use in my day-to-day running of what I do as a creator and as a painter. And this is Hannah Muir, and it is part of what they call their anniversary edition. It's a lovely paper in many regards. Two reasons for that. It's 230 pounds, so it's even a bit heavier than the one I've just showed you. But more importantly, and this is where it really is successful, is it's a gummed block of paper. Now, if you've never used a gummed block of paper, I really thoroughly recommend you try it out, because on every piece of paper you'll see a little mark somewhere on the pad, either at the front or there, where there's tiny little area that is not actually gummed, and that means that you can put a palette knife in or something blunt like a plastic credit card of that nature, and just put it round between the first and the next paper, and then just take the old one off. Only do it when, of course, the paper you've been working on is absolutely dry. The idea of gummed is it saves you taping down, it saves you stretching a paper. You can paint on it. It may buckle during the course of the process of painting, but if you leave it to dry totally, then all the gummed around holds it in one place, and therefore it can dry back to being a very flat piece of paper. So ideal for two reasons. Ideal if you don't want to stretch paper. Ideal also to take out in the field if you're doing plein air. It's a great way of doing things, and you can have a couple of these pads, and you can actually do a plein air on one, put it back in your satchel when it's finished, or leave it to dry off and get the other one out and carry on painting. You don't have to wait for one to dry before you start doing your next painting. Always an advisory thing is to take two of these pads with you, and that way you can keep on working while one is drying and one is just able to be freely worked. So I've always found carrying two pads really works for me. All my students at the gallery all buy two of these. I almost insist on it. But it's a great way that they can come into class and they can work on one. And if they get to a point where they've got to wait for it to dry naturally and they can't sort of use hair dryers and stuff on them because they haven't got the facility, then they get their second pad out and carry on working on a new painting, and they just swap between the two. It works very, very well. Anyway, this is what I'm going to work on today, and it is a lovely surface. Now, again, I think that this is a they call it, I'm sure this one they call a rough surface. It could well just be a knot surface, but either way, it is one that I keep buying, I keep using, and it's my preferred sort of practice or outside painting surface over and above the Daler Rowney, but both of them are excellent products. So, okay, I'm going to crack on. I'm just going to try and do this as quickly as I can and let it dry off, hair dryer between, do the other side, do another sky, and then see what it looks like and see if we can't make something of it with a bit of landscape. Okay, let's get on. Right, I'm going to mix up now a lot of water, and just want to make it for my first sky on here. And to that I'm using just a couple of real colours to do this. A good mix of Ultramarine Blue, and that's ideal. So let's come in, let's make a really strong mix of blue, We can always add more water to it for further down the actual page, as it were, and across the painting. Now my second colour, let's get that one established, is going to be yellow ochre. Lovely colour. I love yellow ochre. It's a nice opaque watercolour, and it works very well. There you go. That's my yellow ochre. And all I'm going to do now is clean my brush out and literally come in and just play around, put some colour on the top here. Let's create skies. So there we go. Quick, quick, quick. Like that. And I'm going to clean my brush and come in with some nice yellow ochre into here. These are my clouds that I'm putting in now. Like so. Just tap off some of these whites. You can leave whites in by all means. There's nothing wrong with that. I'm going to come in with some more blue. Like that. Run the two together in places. Now if I want to, and I can just dry off some of this very quickly, I will just drop in a little bit more blue right at the top. Just drop in a little bit more pigment and let it come down, settle, and do what it wants to do down the page. And that's pretty much my sky done. What I will do is I will bring more water into play as this comes down the page to meet what would be the horizon. So let's bring that down, drop a little bit more blue maybe into there, and let that come down to about there. Now I'm going to let that settle and do what it wants to do before I continue on with the other sky. And it is just as quickly as that. It doesn't take an awful long time to create a wash, but it's the keep practicing of doing washes that make you more confident with the wash. And I think that is the idea with the wash, is having the confidence with the paint, because unlike doing little bits of detail, they can be very expressive, or the detail is the detail. You add to it and you can do it as carefully as you want to. But when you're faced with a sort of a big wash involved, then it's all or nothing with a wash. You get prepared for it, and I suppose it's a little bit like having a small sweetie bar. You look forward to going off and buying it, you get it, you unwrap it, you look at it, 2 seconds later it's gone. It's done. And it's the same with a wash. You get prepared for it, you psych yourself up for doing this wash, and you put the colour on and it's done. You can't keep working it. You can't keep fiddling with it like you can with a bit of detail on a very small brush. Use a big brush, lots of colour, lots of water, get it down there, and it's sorted. And if it's wrong, it's wrong. So I think that this is why doing lots of these little bits of painting on a suitable surface, it doesn't have to be a new pad like this. I'm just using this for my purposes. My main paintings are pretty much always done on good heavyweight paper. I prefer that as a finish, so that's personal. It's not necessary. I need to state that. It's not necessary for you to go out and buy expensive sheets of paper. What represent a size like this would cost you £3.50 just for one sheet. And so you don't really need to keep doing that. But a pad of this for about £11 for 15 sheets, much better idea. And you can keep painting with this. You get 2 of them, 22, 23 quid, and yeah, you're there. And you've got 30 paintings in there, and you can swap between one and the other. So something like this to me is really ideal. I ought to be getting a commission for these. I'm not. I just find that if you get a product that really works for you, stick with it and work with it, and it will pay dividends in the long run. All right, so let us carry on. This, I'm going to dry this off now, and we'll come back around for the second sky. It's pretty much dry, and I'm really glad that it's a practice piece, because I touched it thinking it was dry. It wasn't dry, and I'm left a mark there. But hopefully, with the idea that I've got for this painting at the end of the day, it really doesn't matter. So let us look at doing our second sky. Very much the same color, very much the same idea. just try and make a bit more of your practice piece. And so to that end, I will go back in with my brush, my big brush, and I will mix some more blue. So I've got enough to do the job. Lots of nice blue. And I'm going to come in and I'm just going to play around very much in the same way as I did before. This time I'm going to leave a little bit more white paper. I'm going to come in with some nice yellow. I'm going to drop that in places and just leave some of the white paper. And again, this is now I'm practicing. I'm looking at my cloud structure, trying to create something that does look like clouds as such, and just bringing that into play. Some little bits of blue underneath, and that will grey up some of this because obviously they're making a slightly dirtier green colour. And let's bring that in there. Now we can drop some more in yellow if we wish to. We can play around with this. We can soften edges. And all of this it's just working. You can see how we're lifting colour out. It's starting to fuse. And we're using this and treating this just like a real practice piece. We're not trying to paint two skies to make a painting. Although if you wanted to do it that way, you so could. But we are using this purely as let's practice our skies. Let's practice having more sky painting. So that when we come to do a real sky for our landscape, it really does work. Let's bring that down across the other one. It really doesn't matter where you do that. I'm going to stop it about there. Just take that off. And we have another set of clouds working in there. And if I want to add more color to this, I can do that like that. Very, very simply done. Come in with some more blues, just grey that up. Play around with these shades because again, as I said just now, it is purely to practice. Practice makes perfect. It's all well and good having tons of paintings out there working away and creating work. That's lovely. But if they go wrong or they don't work for one part or one part only, you've wasted all that time on a painting. I firmly believe that if there is an area within your painting that you feel is a little bit weak, if it painting people, painting trees, colours of green, painting water, reflections, skies, clouds, whatever it might be, it's really worth concentrating a little bit of time on practicing those things, because you don't want successive paintings to fail on you if because of the lack of practice on one particular area. So think about that, and it really does, it is a good way of looking at it and working forward. I'm just going to let that settle up now. I'm going to use the hairdryer one more time and I'm going to dry that off, and we've got two skies we've played with. Okay, so two skies, two bits of practice. At that point we could actually leave it and put this away somewhere and be happy that we've done two relatively successful skies. And we can make this thing happen for water, for skies, for sets of trees, anything we want to. We can practice some trees, turn that into a little painting, and so on and so forth. But this one, doing it two ways like this, doesn't have to be the whole piece of paper as well. If you want to have more economy on the processes, then there's nothing stopping you making a simple division between the two and having two halves in this way, or you can have multiples. You can really just cut this whole piece of paper up in terms of where you start and stop your little paintings. You could quarter it, do so many different things well worth considering. But I just decided to make it quick and easy so that you see the whole process and put out in there. Now it's dried off enough to work on, and I can either have a smaller sky and maybe a nice reflection of water, something like that, or I can turn it up the other side and we can do it this way, where we have a great big sky and just a small reflection in the water. I think I'm going to go with that way. And the reason I say that is I want to make something a bit more of this silly little mark that I made. So I'm going to use a slightly smaller brush. This is about a number 10, something like that. And I'm going to mix into that some sepia into my blue. I'm not going to waste any of the blue. It's going to come into a lot of use right now. And I'm going to just use this line through here, just as I suggested, horizon line to that. I'm going to put in some forms up here. I'm going to look at and see what I did. Yeah, I like that. I'm going to come in and I'm going to put in some distant hills. That's a little bit too wet, if I'm totally honest with you. Take that off because I slopped a load of water into that. And while we're still playing around, it's not a big deal. Let's just come back in and let's just put some more blues. Maybe a touch of magenta into that, just to give me a soft distant hill like that. And if we are talking of reflections, let's just register a reflection of this in our water below. Why not? And let that come down to almost nothing through there. Same here. You can almost leave a little bit of white paper suggesting light hitting through there. And so now we have got a nice hillside. Nothing wrong with that. Just take that down. And remember, this is just playing around and just seeing where it goes. I need to dry that now, and we're going to work. We're not working wet in wet anymore. We are working layer upon layer. Okay, I think that's dry enough to continue. It's not bone dry, but it's certainly dry enough to continue. Before I go any further, I want to say that you can use the full piece of paper like this, but you often see me use tape around the edges of mine. You don't actually need to tape up this area. The reason often there are, well, let me start that again. There are two reasons why one tapes their paper. One, to hold it down and stop it buckling too much, so, and when it dries off, it will dry taut, more taut than being left free. And also to give a lovely white border to the painting, nice crisp edge. And both of those are great and sound reasons, and I use them all the time. And to the point where you actually don't need to tape up a gummed piece of paper like this, a gummed block. You don't need to tape it for the first reason because the gum will hold it there. But for the second reason, you will always tape it up, of course. I often, when I'm out and about, I didn't do it for this, but always I'll tape up a piece of paper like this to give that lovely little white edge to it, although you don't need it to hold it down. Just a little point. All right, let's just darken off our color, coming in with a bit more of the sepia into our blue mix now. And I'm just looking at adding some little bits of form in the far distance. This color looks dark. It is dark compared to this, but it is a lot lighter when it dries. So it's a lot of water in it, not too much pigment. I'm just trying to suggest little bits of form, and I can put some of those in here like that through here. Just try and mimic some of the shapes that you have in this so that it does look as though it corresponds with the reflection. Very simple, divisive piece of painting. And I'm going to stop that through there, something like that, and just put the odd little tap of something in there to suggest that we've paid due diligence to whatever we've got in our ground. So we've got a lovely setup going on here now. We have a beautiful set of reflections in our water. Okay, so I'm going to dry that and we're going to carry on. Now I've only partially dried this. I'm going to let that dry off a little bit more, but what I wanted to do is just tease some of this out into the water and let the atmosphere descend through the water. It's not a hard shadow. I only just made that decision, so if it goes horribly wrong, that's through my lack of planning. I just wanted to suggest that in there and create a sort of very soft, almost misty-like effect with my reflections. Tapping into it, it can and probably will leave some almighty horrible marks, but we can go back across some of those later on. So I'm going to come in now, I'm going to put that brush away, and one brush I really love to have fun with is a sword liner, and I have several of them in watercolor. This is a pure squirrel, which is extremely soft hair, and it's not everybody's cup of tea, I've got to say. And I'm just looking for the other one. This is a lovely one, which is a synthetic Sable blend. And this, I'm going to play around with this now. I'm going to put some more sepia into my mix. Going to add in some raw burnt sienna to that as well, just to warm the whole thing up a little bit more. And I'm going to start thinking about adding bits of information in here into this water that's running through here. Just little ideas, little strips of dirt and mud and sticks and little, I don't know, anything you like it to be really. I'm going to correspondingly put little bits of reflection to some of that too, coming out into the water. And look how much fun you can have. Little marks, very thin marks, very hard sometimes to get with a rigger too, but this brush, as long as you've got a good damp point to it, it will sketch around like this all day long to its heart's content, and you can create a lot of fun with this. You can darken some of these forms up and just create all sorts of things. This reminds me of a little area of some marshes that I like close to home, a place called Ochre over towards Sandwich and Thanet ways. Thanet ways, I'm not sure actually. I'm probably, it's anyway. It's a lovely bird area and lovely inlet waterway. And there is a thing called a hard there. It's an old piece of ground that extends out into the water. It's exposed most of the time, but it has some beautiful plants growing on it, but it is absolutely festooned with loads of birds, waders, and all sorts go on there, and it's great. And it's a great place for birders to go and watch. So there's just something there. We've just created a bit more form, a little bit more interest, and there's just a subtle sense of reflection to some of that. And once again, you can pull that out, and while it is wetter now, you can use the side movements of this brush, and you can really sort of pull around with that. Look at that. Just dropping in some water into this just makes that flow beautifully. And all we're doing now is we're creating something from nothing, because had we put this little sketch piece in the drawer, that's it. It would have been a sketch piece. Nothing wrong with that. It would have been a great little sketch, and we'd have learned something from doing that. But here now, we've got something that looks like a little bit of misty morning, lovely early light, distant hills, distant trees and forms in the background, each with their own little bank, and the little misty, you can imagine the vapors coming off the top of the water. And we can do very much the same effect on this one. And this is a very, very quick suggestion for a painting. But even doing this, even taking my practice piece and turning it into a little painting, that in its own right is practice. You're taking something and you're adding to it. You're creating another pictorial form based upon your practices, and you're learning from doing that as well. The process of adding all this paint, this color, looking at the aerial perspective and the reflections and the way that you can put those reflections down really are important. Okay, let's come back and let me now put some indigo, some real darks in there, sepia, really dark, and some indigo, again dark. We've got the blue dark, we've got the brown dark. And let's just come in and let's chap in while this is still wet. Look at that, really rich. And if we want to, we can actually come in here now and we can create even a third layer. Look at that, we can pump that in there, and we can have just a little bit more. We can actually join some of this up, so suggesting that two landforms come together at some point and create a little bit of water between them like that. And we can, yeah, it's just so much you can do. Just come in here now, and it does look quite a mess, gotta say, but it's working. Even if it does look like a mess, it is working. Just tap some of those out, and we can have some little reflections like that in there, and just little taps above, little tap below, a little gap between them suggests that you've got some stick or something there like that, and it's got a nice sense of reflection. Put something there, and you put a corresponding mark there, and you can do this all the way. Now we can make something more of that. I like that. I like the way that that's doing that. Just going to put some water into that, drop that, let that just run down. Look at that. It's so organic. I like that. I just love letting that do its own thing. Just add a little bit of water and let it come and do what it wants to do. Once this is dry, we can put some stronger forms in here if we wish to, and we can make something more of it. This is probably a little drier. Let's just test a little bit. And it's still quite wet, but you can see the difference. It's a lot drier than this, but I'm going to stop there because that will give me some horrible marks. Just dry this off and let's come back and finish it. Okay, so that's dry, and let's just put this to bed, as it were. Let's just finish it off. A little bit of Indian red into that maybe, and let's just give it some stronger little forms in here, little dark shadows into some of it like that, so that it makes a little strength, a little stronger sense in one or two places. Don't want to completely lose all those wonderful little textures, but they do add and come together, and just to give some real strong darks where you want them, like that. Working very, very fast just to try and get this done so you can see what we're on about. Maybe just a little bit just to give that little section a bit of dark, a bit more form. One or two taps out through here. And I say this brush really does work. It just comes into its own. And do the same sort of thing through here. Just one or two. I'm going to actually warm that up because it's got a lot of blue in there. I'm actually going to come in with some raw sienna. Just mix some of that off. It's going to be dirty, it's going to be grey because there's other contaminant colours in there. Let's just come in there with a lot of colour, and let's just sort of see if we can't add some sort of warmer tones to our reflections and our light through here. Just tapping some of those around. Just take some of the water, dampness, just soften the edges at the bottom, and just come back in with one or two dark bits just to suggest a bit more. Otherwise this one hasn't got a lot of presence compared to this one, so we're going to bring the two areas together a little bit more like that and just give a sense of reflection there. We're going to soften that very shortly. We won't let that dry off hard. Just going to put some of those darks way down through here. It does look as though this area is close by. There we go. Dampness, take all the moisture out of your brush. Just gently tease across these areas here. Gently bring that down in one or two places just to increase the sense that there is little reflective marks in the water of some of these taller pieces like there. Just bring that down, just drag it down a little bit of paint just to give that a sense of depth. Take that down through there. I like that, that works for me. We've already done that, so let us just do something that puts a little bit of life into this. Let's just come to an area maybe here. Let's just put in somewhat darker than that would be good. So let's come in with some indigo and some the sepia, just making a little post type thing there in the water, little gap so that we've got a reflection in the water like that. Maybe a little bar across the top, little platform of some sort, and we can just suggest that there. And then of course we can put on a nice cormorant. Often you get these lovely blackbirds drying themselves off from their fishing. And this could be one step too far with the painting, I don't know. It looked alright. If it doesn't now, then okay, it was one step too far. But I'm not unhappy with it. I think my cormorant's looking a bit more like a parrot. I don't know if I can take that off any sense. Probably not. I'm going to leave it there. And up until that point, I think we were doing quite good. So the moral of this story is have fun, enjoy what you've done, but just don't push it too far in the fun stakes. But there we go. If it's not working, it doesn't work. Never mind, it doesn't matter. I hope you get the idea. I hope you can see that by just taking a bit of practice, a little bit of thought before you start the practice piece, and utilize your spare bits of paper as best you can, and then look at them at the end and see if anything is suggested to you by way of adding to it in creating a wonderful little landscape or a nice little picture to boot. So with that all said and done, I hope you've got something from this little video. And if you do and you've enjoyed it, as I say at the start, click the like button. Thank you very much. Add a comment or two. That'll be great. Catch each and every one of you in next week's video, next Friday, 3 o'clock. Don't forget that on YouTube. Take care. Happy painting. Be safe. All the best, guys. Bye-bye.